watching the Debka File, a weekly roundup of exclusive news, insight, and analysis of the Middle East, broadcast to you live from the heart of the region. Coming up on the program today, Jewish home ministers call off a walkout as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu avoids early elections. U.S. and Russian sea and air forces build up off Syrian waters. Iran's guiding hand in the recent Gaza hostilities. Portugal and China's plan to build a space launch complex on the strategic Azores Islands. Russia backs late ruler Muammar Gaddafi's son for Libya's upcoming elections. And now to our top headlines. Education Minister Naftali Bennett and Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked announced that their Beit HaYehudi, or Jewish Home Party, would stay in the government, staving off early elections. The two ministers made the announcement at a special news conference convened in the Knesset, in which they were widely predicted to announce their resignations. Bennett had previously said that if the Prime Minister did not grant him the defense portfolio, he would resign from the coalition, though the press conference saw him backtrack on this issue. The two ministers conditioned their support to stand by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu so long as he honors his pledge to reverse what Bennett and Shaked dubbed the hesitant and stammering security policy of the last decade, and switch to a more proactive course for leading the country to victory.
אם ראש הממשלה רציני בכוונותיו, ואני רוצה להאמין למילים שלו אמש, הרי שאני אומר כאן לראש הממשלה, אנחנו מסירים ברגע זה את כל דרישותינו הפוליטיות, ונתייצב לסייע לך במשימה אדירה זו, שישראל תחזור לנצח. אני מניח שאני אשלם מחיר פוליטי מסוים בשעות הקרובות, בימים הקרובים. לא נורא, נתגבר. You win some, you lose some.
On Sunday night, Netanyahu announced that he was taking over as defense minister in the wake of an important security step which would call for sacrifices. Netanyahu urged the other parties in his coalition not to topple the government, stating that an election at this time would be irresponsible. The Prime Minister pledged that just as in the past, he had clear winning plans. First, to save the sagging economy, and later, to lift Israel out of international isolation. He said he now also had a clear plan of how to deal with Israel's mounting security challenges at a time which he called highly complicated for national security.
שוחחתי עם כל ראשי הקואליציה. אמרתי להם, זה הזמן לגלות אחריות. אל תפילו את הממשלה, ובייחוד, לא בעיתוי ביטחוני רגיש זה. יש לנו עוד שנה שלמה עד הבחירות. אנחנו בעיצומה של המערכה, ובאמצע המערכה לא נוטשים. באמצע המערכה לא משחקים בפוליטיקה. ביטחון המדינה הוא מעבר לפוליטיקה. אני לא אגיד כאן הערב מתי נפעל ואיך נפעל. יש לי תוכנית ברורה. אני יודע מה לעשות ומתי לעשות. ואנו נעשה זאת.
This development has for the time being terminated the government crisis triggered last week by Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman's resignation, though the coalition remains on shaky ground with 61 seats out of a possible 120. At Monday's press conference, Shaked accused Lieberman of handing Hamas a prize by way of his resignation, nearly collapsing the government. Now, as Debka Files reports, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, who were celebrating their success in nearly toppling the government, must prepare for Israel's next military operation. The USS Harry S. Truman, a U.S. aircraft carrier, and a strike force of 5 guided missile warships have reached the waters off the coast of Syria. The warships entered the Mediterranean on Friday, just as the Russian Middle East fleet concluded a series of search and destroy exercises led by 2 Russian-guided missile frigates, Admiral Makarov and Admiral Essen, who are armed with Caliber NK cruise ship-to-shore missiles. By the end of the training exercises, there were a total of 8 Russian warships in the eastern Mediterranean. The buildup of U.S.-Russian sea and air forces opposite Syria come ahead of 2 key events. The first, approaching meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit set to take place next week in Buenos Aires. Syria is expected to be an issue high on their agenda, as is the expanding Iranian presence in the country. The second event is a possible Israeli airstrike against Iranian targets in Syria. Israel has so far refrained from launching any attacks in Syria following the accidental downing on September 17th of a Russian Il-20 plane by Syrian missiles. Should Israel decide to attack Iranian targets in Syria, it will now have to face off against the Russian newly installed S-300 air defense missiles and possible Russian retaliation for the downed plane. The new U.S. presence in the Mediterranean lends backing to Israel, but the S-300 system greatly enhances Syria's early warning capabilities, making it much harder for Israel to mount surprise attacks. Debka's military sources have reported that the Russian army has not fully completed the deployment of the air defense network across Syria, leaving a window of opportunity for Israel to attack Iranian targets in the country. Yet even if Israel would be able to launch a successful attack, it will still be left with a recurring problem. Russia will almost certainly continue to bolster its air defense systems, which could lead to an arms race in Syria. But one thing is certain. If this confrontation were to occur, it would represent the first direct clash between U.S.-manufactured fifth-generation F-35 stealth planes and advanced Russian air defense missiles, and would mark the first test of U.S., Russian, and Israel electronic warfare systems. Iranian influence may have been the guiding hand to the recent hostilities along the Gaza border. Earlier this month, on November 5th, when French President Emmanuel Macron's political advisor arrived in Jerusalem, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked him to carry an ultimatum to Beirut. Shut down plants upgrading Hezbollah's surface missiles with newly supplied Iranian precision guidance munitions, or else Israel will destroy them. Iran has also set up similar plants in Syria. Israel's message, according to Debka, was handed to Lebanese President Michel Aoun. The following day, Israel received an answer in the form of a barrage of missiles launching from Gaza. The majority of these rockets were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome, but there was one rocket that managed to penetrate Israel's air defense systems. Debka File sources identified the rocket as a Falak 2, with a range of 11 kilometers, manufactured at the Shahid Bagheri Industries complex, which is part of Iran's aerospace industries. The missile is designed to destroy defense systems such as Iron Dome batteries. The Iranian rocket showed its destructive capabilities in Ashkelon, killing a Palestinian worker and injuring 2 women. One of Falak 2's advantages is its mobility, allowing it to be launched from any combat 4x4 vehicle, each which carries 2 rockets. While Islamic Jihad secretly received the weapon 2 years ago, it was only given the green light to use it in the latest Palestinian rocket offensive.
So far we have struck more than 150 military targets, all of them military targets belonging to either the Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, again signifying the difference here between what the terrorists do and what we do. They target civilians and we target terrorist activity.
The recent Gaza hostilities have bought Iran and its proxy Hezbollah some time. Israel's Air Force has been focused on the Gaza border with retaliatory operations against Hamas and Islamic Jihad targets. This has so far diffused the Israeli threat to destroy the weapons workshops in Lebanon and Syria. Joining us in the studio is Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Bar-Ilan University professor and an expert on the Arab-Israeli conflict. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
It now seems we have a new major threat along the Gaza border, the Falak 2 missiles. Why is the recent Gaza hostilities the first the public is hearing of it?
Well, these missiles apparently are much more problematic than the missiles which we got used to in the past. They are bigger, they are heavier, but the real problem is that they are more precise. And this combination of weight and being precise makes those missiles a real threat on targets around Gaza. The Gazans, apparently the Islamic Jihad, succeeded to smuggle parts of this missile. Part of this are produced in Gaza. And I think that the Israeli security community should be very worried about these missiles, because if this is the ability of the people in Gaza to develop and to launch such missiles, it means that in a couple of years from today, they might be even more capable to bring much more damage to Israel. and this has to be taken seriously very well by the Israeli authorities.
Is this what former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman was referring to when he warned that the threat from Hamas and Islamic Jihad would soon be equal to that of Hezbollah?
Apparently this is what he meant. Of course, the stockpile of missiles which those in Gaza have is much smaller than what they have in Lebanon because of the different arenas. Yet, having precise missiles in Gaza is something which Israel should be very worried of.
Mm-hmm. If these missiles have indeed been in store for the greater part of 2 years, and Israel has been aware of them, why has it not destroyed them?
Well, it could be that the storage is under a hospital or under a school or in other sensitive areas which actually prevent any attack from Israel's side, because Israel will never attack a hospital or a school in order to get rid of some missiles.
Mm. Following the recent confrontation with Gaza and the launch of this new missile, why has Israel so far refrained from retaliating against Iranian targets in the region?
Well, if Israel attacks Iran directly, it will be a regional game changer, because so far this region is characterized by war by proxies. Iran doesn't fight personally on Yemen, they only use the Houthis. Iran doesn't fight in Syria, they fight with militias which they brought. Hezbollah, for example. So this is the rule of the game, and you attack the militias or the proxies. Attacking Iran directly will be totally a different game, and I'm not sure that Israel wants to change the game in such a way only because 1 or 2 missiles were launched against Israel from Gaza.
Is an airstrike on Iranian targets or proxies in Syria even plausible now with the deployment of the S-300 missile systems?
What worries Israel more than the S-300 is actually the Russian reaction, because the Russians today apparently are very reluctant to allow Israel to attack anything in Syria, since the attack which the Syrians knocked down a Russian airplane, and the Russians actually blame Israel for the fact that the Russians knocked down the airplane. And recently, means the recent months, Israel apparently refrains from attacking targets in Syria, targets which otherwise would have been attacked. Apparently, this thing could be changed only by a real good and deep meeting between Netanyahu and Putin, which so far Putin tries to avoid.
Mm-hmm. And what does the U.S. presence in the Mediterranean signify with regards to Russia, Iran, and Syria?
Well, there are reports about some vessels which the Americans are sending to the eastern part of the Mediterranean. Don't forget that there is a ground force in the eastern part of Syria, American force. And apparently the Americans want to have more involvement in Syria, yet they are very slow in this. And I am at all not sure that America wants, or Trump wants to sink in the Syrian mud as America was in Iraq until 2010. So reluctantly, they try to have more presence in the area, yet the Americans are totally not ready to start fighting against others. Don't forget that Russia actually is the master of the game in Syria, and most probably America doesn't want to have any clash with Russia on Syrian soil.
Dr. Mordechai Kedar, thank you for speaking with us.
Pleasure.
Portugal and China have quietly concluded a program of cooperation to build a space launch complex on the strategic Azores Islands. The islands, dubbed the crossroads of the Atlantic for their position across major shipping lanes, would grant China a strategic foothold in the mid-Atlantic. Beijing already maintains a military presence in the Pacific opposite America's eastern shores, and this joint project with Portugal, a NATO ally, would grant it access opposite the U.S. western seaboard as well. The Azores are a chain of 9 volcanic islands stretching some 370 miles into the Atlantic Ocean. The westernmost island is located roughly 2,600 miles from the U.S. East Coast port of Hampton Roads. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to finalize the joint Starlab project during a state visit to Lisbon next month. The project will cost an estimated 50 million euros, Portuguese Minister for Science and Technology Manuel Heitor said, with China and Portugal equally sharing the costs. The cooperative program would see the establishment of a laboratory for building microsatellites for oceanographic research. Starlab is set to establish facilities in both Portugal and Shanghai in China, as well as construct satellites for conducting detailed research into the interaction of oceanography, agriculture, and fisheries. The proposed commercial launch project has garnered great interest throughout the world, attracting 14 companies and organizations from Europe, Russia, and the US, all vying to build a spaceport on the Azores island of Santa Maria. According to independent studies, this mid-Atlantic island is geographically advantaged, permitting an unobstructed launch trajectory over the ocean and uniquely situated between Europe, the Americas, and Africa. Lisbon is expected to select bid winners by mid-2019 in the hopes that the spaceport will be operational in 2021. Russia may be trying to secure some influence over the upcoming Libyan elections. This past week, an international conference in Palermo, sponsored by Italy and the UN, was hailed a success by Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte after Libya's numerous rival parties and factions agreed to meet again in early 2019 to prepare the country for elections. This is the first ray of light for the chaotic country since the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011.
Diciamo che è stato compiuto un passo avanti, possiamo dirlo, Hassan, è stata completata un'ulteriore tappa verso questo percorso molto articolato che le Nazioni Unite, come ricalibrate da Salamé, dal qui presente Salamé, hanno definito, e noi ci inseriamo come facilitatori di questo percorso.
So I do consider this conference as a success and as an important milestone in our common struggle to bring back peace, security, and prosperity to the Libyan people. The Libyan people deserves a life that is much better than the one they are now under. And to see that the international community can gather and send a unified message to them that it is high time they take their destiny in their own hands with our support is crucial. And Palermo will be remembered as a milestone in this common efforts to help our Libyan friends have a clear path forward out of the situation in which the country has slipped into.
Debka Weekly sources reported that alongside the conference, 3 key developments took place. The first, Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev's advisor for Libya announced that Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the son of the late ruler Muammar Gaddafi, had been invited to take part in the coming political process. Second, General Khalifa Haftar, the commander of the Libyan National Army, refused to sit down at Palermo with Islamist delegations, but agreed for the first time to join rival Fayez al-Sarraj, Prime Minister of the Government of National Accord in Tripoli that is recognized by the UN.
لا ما لي علاقة بالمؤتمر. المؤتمر فيه وفد أرسلناه من 4 أيام، وأعتقد أنه شارك مشاركة فعالة فيه كل شيء يعني. ولكن أنا وبكرة مع الرؤساء اللي على محيطين بليبيا يعني طوقس معهم، فهؤلاء اللي عندي في مجتمع بكرة، ونتحدث ننتهز فرصة تواجدهم في القرب من ليبيا مرة واحدة، ونريد أن كثير من الأشياء اللي نحبه نتحدث فيها لمصلحة بلدنا يعني.
Finally, Qatar, Turkey, and Islamist groups dominant in West Libya were notably absent from the conference, indicating they may have been sidelined as political players in Libya's future. Russia, in particular, has been reeling to exert its influence on Libya since the U.S., under President Barack Obama, in collaboration with NATO powers, got the backing of the UN Security Council to overthrow Gaddafi. Now, Russia is throwing its full support behind Saif al-Islam Gaddafi and General Haftar, a powerful political duo. And now for a roundup of weekly stories you may have missed. Moshe Leon, a 62-year-old national religious candidate, won the election as mayor of Jerusalem by a slim majority in a second runoff against secular candidate 35-year-old Ofer Berkovich. Leon had support of the Likud party and other top politicians, including Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman and Interior Minister Aryeh Deri of Shas, as well as former Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat. A handwritten letter by Albert Einstein warning of the dangers of anti-Semitism nearly a decade before Nazis' rise to power was sold this week for nearly $40,000 at the Kedem Auction House in Jerusalem. Einstein wrote the letter to his sister Maria in 1922, informing her that he was hiding for fear of his life following the assassination of his friend, Germany's Jewish foreign minister, by right-wing extremists. Police warned Einstein that his life could also be in danger. Here are brewing economically and politically dark times, so I'm happy to be able to get away from everything, he wrote. Einstein eventually relocated to the United States and renounced his German citizenship in 1933 with the rise of the Nazis to power. That's all for this week's edition of the Debka File. We'll be back with you next week for more exclusive news, insight, and analysis. Make sure to check out our Facebook page at Israel English News and our website. I'm Ladar Gervais-Lazi. Thanks for watching.